field day.
No, like we like assholes. We do. I mean, and I understand like the science of why it's like the dark triad traits, like the same trait. Yeah.
Can you define the dark triad? Because I only discovered this
God.
recently.
Oh God, I don't remember it off the top of my head. But it's like a guy that's aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Like why do women stay with the men that like beat them? Because the same men that like are aggressive and like beat them can also beat up someone else. So it's the same trait, right? A guy that's controlling, right? He also can control the environment. Yeah. So it's I don't remember all of them, but it's like the same traits that make a guy like completely like an awful like partner also make him a really good one. Does that make sense?
So the dark triad. So I've had some experience knowing about this. It's pretty interesting. And when I saw her talking about it, I respect her for saying I don't fully know. So always saying your scope of practice is something I'm big on too. And it doesn't mean you can't talk about things, just know how far you can talk about things. Even I have my limitations, right? So with the dark triad, there's 3 parts. That's the name triad. There's Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. Now, all these are subclinical. Like I mentioned on the previous clip, this means it's not presenting all the effects of being a disorder, because once it's to that point, it's actually clinical and this is way more severe. So when people present some traits of narcissism or some traits of psychopathy, this is what we're talking about. So what are each one? So psychopathy is more so having less empathy for the world. Your actions are dictated more so by your own self-interest. And they kind of overlap in some senses, but they also differ. With narcissism, this is a greater sense of self, like a God complex, thinking that you're bigger, more grandiose than you are. Also is dealing with egocentrism. It also deals with how you may use people to achieve your goals. Like people talk about gaslighting. So that's when you put someone down by reinforcing thoughts in their head that may not be there to uplift what you're trying to accomplish. And they start questioning if it's really happening. Like if you say, oh, I'm sorry you felt that way, you're dismissing the fact that they did feel a way so you can feel better about yourself because you could do no wrong, right? So that's a little bit about narcissism. And Machiavellianism, this is one of my favorite. Think about something like politicians. Machiavellianism, can see the name, comes from the philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, and he's written numerous books talking about topics of like deception, right? So when you see someone who scores high on Machiavellianism, they're good at deceiving, playing people against each other, plotting. That's why I likened it to being a politician. So these traits, the dark triad, they make up the traits that she mentioned. Why do they seem preferable to a dating partner with women? Now, I don't necessarily think they're preferable to the extent of they want someone who's completely cold, standoffish, only cares about themselves, because obviously that's not beneficial to a relationship. But going back to what I mentioned earlier on the first clip, nice guys, right? These guys who have these traits to even some extent, even a little bit, is not necessarily a bad thing, because you do have to play the world to your advantage to some cases. Like humans are very social creatures. We evolved to live in societies. And once upon a time, we would communicate with grunts and noises and became language. And once language came about, more body language came. See, I'm moving my hands and stuff. And then these things played a role in how we interpret things. And then you talk about things like lying or bending the truth or omitting information. This all leads to it. So these traits have a role in society, not necessarily for good or bad, but to accomplish an outcome. Because at the end of the day, we need to keep going from a biological standpoint and now from a societal standpoint. So guys who present these traits, it's not saying that they need to have the high level of them, but having some of them could be beneficial, because if a woman wants a leader, an aggressive man that takes charge, they're going to have a certain level of the dark triad traits. But obviously, like I say, it's subclinical. We're not talking about Ted Bundy, right? That's crazy to say his name. But remember, even though he was a convicted murderer, there's women still wanting him. And also say someone like a fictional character, Joe from You. I see memes about how, I see why I think the way I do in My Toxic Choice of Men when I knew I liked Joe. Not the best guy, but his characteristics presented some things that were appealing to an extent. It's just a matter of how high and how severe.